Hi, I'm Jim Heavey from Wood Magazine. Titebond has asked me how I would use some of their glues. The glue in a woodworking joint is as strong as the wood. To assure a good glue bond, let's review some of the common mistakes and how to fix them. Glue bonds best to freshly machined, smooth mating edges. All boards should be machined to be 90 degrees from the edge to the face, and they should be even along their entire length. It should take very little pressure to provide what I call a light, tight fit. Now this can be done on a table saw, a joiner, or even a router. All stock should be at the same moisture content or acclimated to the area that they're going to be machined in. To do this, you can stack boards around the wall to allow air to get to all sides or sticker them. Providing the correct amount of glue to a board's mating edges is important. Too little glue weakens the bond. Too much glue can complicate the glue cleanup. Apply a thin, even layer of glue to both mating surfaces. Putting glue on one edge and rubbing it onto the other works just as well. A sign of adequate glue is the presence of small beads of glue on the top and bottom of the glue-up without excessive pooling or dripping. There is a difference when gluing edge grain, face grain, and end grain. Generally, glue is more evenly absorbed when doing edge grain and face grain, and when glued together, the bonds are very strong. Even edge grain to face grain is very strong. End grain gluing, however, exposes more porous surfaces, thereby resulting in a weakened bond. Think of it as a series of soda straws. If these were the end grains on a board, and I tried to put these together so that each of the straws matched perfectly, it would still provide a fairly weak joint because the space is between and around the straws. End-grained joinery allows for machining that edge so that more surface area is used for putting end grain next to edge grain. So now I'm going to apply glue on what becomes face grain. The resulting glue up is far stronger. Edge gluing is a process of joining multiple boards into large flat panels. A tabletop is one such example. These boards first need to be milled to make sure the edges are at 90 degrees to the face, and this can be done on a table saw or a joiner. And then interior woodworking glue is applied evenly to both edges and the panels clamped. The boards are then clamped for 30 minutes with just enough pressure to spread the glue and hold the boards into alignment until the glue sets. Excessive pressure will only reduce the amount of glue in the joint and may actually bow the assembly. Once the joint is closed and even, just an additional half turn on the clamps is all that's necessary to provide the additional pressure needed. There is generally no need to reinforce these joints with biscuits, dowels, or splines. A good glue bond will provide a joint that's stronger than the wood itself. Because this is a water-based glue we've used, squeeze out can easily be cleaned off with a wet rag, or it can be scraped off before the glue completely hardens, but after it's lost that wet look. This joint should not be stressed for 24 hours to allow for a full glue cure. Laminating wood is the process of joining boards along their face to create thicker stock. This can be done in a flat plane or as a bent lamination. In flat plane laminations, the glue is spread on the face of each board. Now it can be rolled on with a roller or applied with a spreader. If the lamination is to have multiple layers, using a glue with a longer set time may be appropriate. The glue up should be clamped with even pressure to assure a consistent glue line on each layer. A variety of clamps may be necessary to assure this even pressure. And normal practice is to make the laminations oversized so they can be trimmed later to the correct size. Now the clamps can be removed after 30 minutes, but the joint should not be stressed for a full 24 hours to allow for a complete glue cure. Bent laminations follow the same procedures as those used on flat laminations, except that they're multidimensional. Think of the bent arm on a chair. In order to bend wood, and depending upon the species of the wood selected, the wood is cut into thin strips, 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, so that that wood can conform to the form that you've created without cracking. It's very important when doing bent laminations to use a very slow setting glue. And your choices are a water-based woodworking glue, or a polyurethane glue. Best practice is to perform a dry clamp without glue to assure the proper alignment of the laminations and the placing of clamps to provide even pressure across the glue up. The entire lamination should be made both wider and longer than needed to allow for trimming to final dimension. Only after a successful dry clamp should the same procedures be used with glue. Now the clamp should be left on until the glue fully cures, and these times may vary depending upon the type of glue used. But in any case, the joint should not be stressed for a full 24 hours to allow for a full glue cure. Many woodworkers will do a trial glue up just to provide a real-life test. Then adjustments can be made to remedy any problems. Some bent laminations may display what's called springback when being removed from the form. It's a desire of that wood to return to its former flat state. It's usually a result of the thickness of the wood used, the type of glue used, or maybe even the radius of the form. Polyurethane glue has a very rigid bond line, reducing the possibility of any springback. But remedies should include a review of all these variables. Veneering is the process of gluing a very thin piece of wood, the veneer, to a very stable but inexpensive substrate, somewhat like this plywood, to provide the looks of solid wood. Many woods are too expensive to use in their full thickness, and they'd be prone to expansion and contraction problems when used on typical woodworking projects. Here is a simple way to provide attractive, functional, and inexpensive additions to your projects. The substrate material is cut larger than needed, and interior woodworking glue is applied to the surface with a roller or a spreader. This film of glue is all that's necessary. The veneer is placed on a glued surface and clamped. Like any other gluing operation, clamping pressure should be uniform across the entire surface. Because this veneer is so thin, we'll be using cawls to help provide that pressure. Cawls are flat and rigid, and the veneers are clamped between the cawls to allow for an even overall pressure. To avoid any chance of glue seeping around the edges or through the pores of this very thin wood veneer and adhering to the cawls, a piece of wax paper is used to top the veneer. This assembly should be left for approximately 30 minutes before unclamping. Cleaning glue squeeze-out is not possible while it's still wet and underneath the clamps, but a careful sanding of the finished surface will remove any remaining adhesive. Now the finished assembly can be trimmed to final dimensions. Sanding the joint too quickly can lead to less than desirable results. The moisture in the glue will temporarily swell the edges of the glue line, and as the glue cures and the moisture evaporates, that line returns to normal. Now, temperature and humidity will affect the timing of that movement. Sanding a glue up too soon will level that joint temporarily, leading to mental and physical depression as the wood continues to dry. Give that glue up time to dry, maybe even a few days before completing your final sanding.